All right, cool. Thank you, Brian Perry. Hello everybody. Welcome to Your Component Library is Not a Design System. And let's get started. So I'm Evan Wilhite. I'm a senior front-end engineer at Four Kitchens. I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Four Kitchens is distributed. So we're all kind of across the US. And obviously I'm Emulsify project lead.
And I am Brian Lewis. I'm a front-end engineer at Four Kitchens. I live in Wichita, Kansas, and I'm also an Emulsify project co-lead, I guess.
All right, so when it comes to design systems these days, words are definitely hard. We are in the midst of a period of time where terms are actually being defined in the public consciousness, similar to a decade ago with responsive design. Folks in the design system space literally have glossary sections on their websites, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about it because the concepts around these are well formed. So let's get some terminology out of the way. So what do we mean when we talk about a component library? At Four Kitchens, we use the term component library for this part of the design system because it signifies to the widest audience what this piece is. But for developers, a better description might be project scaffolding, because what we are referring to as a component library is more than just a group of organized components. It's also a UI workshop for building and sharing them, and a build system to process, stream, minify, etc., all the things. So this is what Emulsify has historically been and still contains, but let's take a look at these three pieces in the new Emulsify. So first, let's talk about the UI workshop and build system. So if you're familiar with Emulsify's history, you may be asking why these tools. From a high level, the first reason is incredible support. So Storybook has 900 plus committers, 6.8 million plus monthly installs, and then Webpack, 600 plus committers and over 35 million monthly downloads. So these are just massively popular and well-supported products. Also, they have rich ecosystems. So Storybook with its add-ons and Webpack with its plugins ecosystem is just incredibly deep. And then, of course, they use each other. So we had an interest from the beginning in trying to keep the tools as minimal and extendable as possible. So that's a benefit. But finally, there's the components themselves. So Four Kitchens is obviously deeply invested in Drupal, so naturally Twig had to be a first-class citizen in any version of Emulsify, and it is. So in fact, there is a starter kit project called Emulsify Drupal that packages these three pieces together: Storybook, Webpack, and Twig support, and they're ready-made as a Drupal theme. And this is what replaces the old Emulsify. This is similar to that. But here's the cool part. Because of this new tool chain, specifically Storybook and Webpack, we've now opened ourselves to enormous other possibilities. So the front-end landscape is growing, and we all know it. Even within the Drupal community, there is a massive focus on flexibility of tooling, particularly on the front end. And because of this choice of Storybook and Webpack, we get support for all of these and more that I haven't listed here built in. And so if you're not up on your logos, this includes and is not limited to React and React Native, Vue, Angular, Ember, HTML5, and then because of our first-class Twig support, WordPress using the Timber plugin. So wow, right? So now that we have the component library side well in hand, what's left to talk about? Oh yeah, design systems. So component libraries equal happy developers. Or maybe if you're lucky, a happy production team where designers and developers are now on the same page. But what we found at Four Kitchens is that no amount of component-driven development, shared tooling, or UI workshops can guarantee long-term success by only making one team happy. Long-term success requires full buy-in from all teams across an organization. It requires buy-in from content strategy, the ones who decide what components should go where and how to populate them. From UX, a team that also cares about how and where components are used, as well as whether those components are meeting their success criteria. From accessibility and compliance, are these components usable by underserved audiences? Testing and QA, the team who fights for component usage to be documented well and components to be versioned. POs and PMs, project managers and product owners, the stewards of project success and budget. And then on a higher level, of course, marketing, the ones who decide where the entire project fits into the big picture of brand success, and the stakeholders, those with the highest vision of organizational success. So these are the audiences of a successful design system. All of these teams have to have buy-in. This is why a component library is not a design system. So then what is a design system? Well, let's start by imagining an organization. So 4Kitchens does a lot of work in higher education. So allow me to introduce you to the totally not fake Western University of Pennsylvania. It is fake. This is a prestigious university who, in its rich 300+ year history, has risen to the highest levels of academic rigor. So obviously at that level, they have a strong core brand identity, one that must be shared and upheld by its many schools. Schools like the amazing College of Studio Arts, or as many call it, the RISD of the Keystone State. And of course, you can imagine there are obviously a number of other schools as well in an organization this size. And obviously, we can't spend all our time making fake logos. So let's talk about the organizational needs. So what are the needs of a top-level organization? Here are a few. Brand consistency, so a clear identity. The ability to tell everyone in the organization how to tell the story across all products. So this is documentation. The organization's web property or properties, because there may be multiple, including internal. And then, of course, cost. They're interested in keeping costs down across the entire organization and their sub-properties. And then more than ever, there is a vested interest in guaranteeing accessibility across the entire organization. So what about property needs? Likely, they will need their own unique brand identity and their own web property, but they're also going to be interested in staying within their own budget and in maintaining the organization's brand consistency in general. So a good design system not only speaks to multiple audiences, it addresses both of these levels, the top level organization and all of its individual properties. So let's take a look at the key ingredients to a design system that will address these various needs. So a good design system starts with a living style guide. And unfortunately, this is one of those terms that requires definition these days. By a style guide, I mean this is not a component library, not Storybook or Pattern Lab or something like that. Those are what Brad Frost calls the workshop. And what we're talking about here is what he refers to as the storefront. So the style guide is the authoritative source for all teams to document what he defines well as the official story of how your organization designs and builds digital products. So the style guide contains that story. And we'll speak to this in more detail here in a minute. And next, a good design system obviously also includes the component libraries like we just talked about, likely at multiple levels, the global organizational level and for properties as well. And finally, it involves a smart, cost-effective workflow. So it involves sharing what needs to be shared between properties, components, documentation, and aligning efforts across all of those teams. So just to give an example, if a new component is created and blessed by the production team, its usage may still need to be documented by content strategy, and then its success measured by the user experience team, and then testing run by a QA team. So not only do you need technical workflows around sharing design and code, but also organizational workflows for how to distribute that. So let's dig into these three columns further. And let's use our client, Western University of Pennsylvania, as an example. So they need a style guide, a place to document guidelines around a great many things, including branding, colors, accessibility, typography, and voice and tone. And that documentation will include components, but not just components and code, but also content for a variety of audiences, like instructions around component variations, when to use them, their look and feel, and any assets related to that component. And also, and this is key, this piece has to be easy to find, easy to digest, and easy to update. And so now that we're familiar with component libraries, let's talk about what is required for them at this design system level. So at this level, we need the ability to create components that are global and that they can be used across all projects. That way we can reap all the benefits of component-driven development, except scaled across a variety of projects. So benefits like a single source of truth for each component, that being shared across multiple properties. Accessibility, performance visual regression testing, and of course, reusability. This means there will be multiple component libraries. So you can see on the slide here, we have a global component library and documentation, and then we have reused components and then property components. So this is what we're talking about. And all of these will have build systems and tooling to help quickly build and iterate projects while getting the benefits of maintaining organizational consistency around things like branding and accessibility, things that we talked about earlier. So this also means that the tooling will have to be flexible enough to support a variety of languages and techniques. So you can imagine an organization's property may be built using Drupal. So let's say for Western University, their main property is built using Drupal and it has a traditional Twig front end, but they might have multiple properties underneath that organization that use things from WordPress to React to Vue to HTML to whatever. So as you can imagine, this means we need well-defined workflows to tie these pieces together. On the technical side, we need to be able to document the same components in the style guide that are being used in properties. So carrying that sort of concept that we've always had in Emulsify of having authoritative living representations of your components. We need to carry that to the style guide. So we also need component libraries and the style guide to share those, meaning they're updated whenever the components themselves are updated so that both of them are living. And this across all properties supporting a variety of languages. So this obviously is going to mean we need managing and versioning of packages. And beyond that, the organization itself will need to actually structure product workflows. So workflows for updating documentation, for updating components across languages, because you can imagine those are supported by different teams a lot of times. And then for notifying teams when those updates occur. These three things are the key ingredients to a design system. So component libraries shared across well-defined workflows and documented in an authoritative style guide. And this is the Emulsify Design System, a style guide generator built as a Gatsby theme. And here you can document pages and components using Markdown and MDX, and soon any number of content sources using available Gatsby source plugins. For components, the style guide has built-in support for viewing Storybook components and built-in code block support for code and syntax highlighting. Also, it is extremely customizable via the Gatsby theming ecosystem, and we're going to show you a little bit of this in the demo. And then, of course, the component library is powered, as we've mentioned before, via Storybook. And because of the flexible tooling, the workflow can cover any situation, from powering an organization's component library via packages to a properties component library. So this is like our School of Arts property, their component library, using a combination maybe of shared packages, so organizational components, and also their own local components. And again, we're going to demo this here in a second. And so let's see, and I should mention too, the kind of the strength of all of this is built on Webpack and Webpack's ability to consume things from a variety of sources. And so again, Webpack is at the heart of Gatsby, it's at the heart of Storybook, and it's at the heart of this workflow of being able to share these things. So let's see all of this in action. I'm going to stop sharing and pass it over to Brian.
All right, can I get a verbal confirmation that you can see my slide that says demo?
I see demo.
Excellent, thank you. So in this example, we're going to walk through, we have created two web properties under the same organization that uses shared organizational components and styles. The first is the Western University of Pennsylvania, and the second is the Western University of Pennsylvania Studio Arts College. The arts property will use some of the organizational components, but will also have custom components and styles that are not shared by the overall Western U organization. So the first thing we did when we started this project was to create the components that would be shared by all of the Western U properties. We created one repository for Twig components and a separate repository for the SAS files. This isn't strictly necessary in all situations. For example, if your organization only has one property, you don't need to separate them out like this. Or if your organization is 100% standardized on Twig, and Sass, for example, you could house those together in a single repository. The reason we're demoing this with separate repositories is to show how one organization could have properties built with any technology and just share the things they can. For example, there could be a Drupal site and a React app, but as long as they are both configured to use Sass, then they can share that Sass repository and only have to worry about creating the high quality markup in their respective languages. So the point is the pipeline is flexible to meet any organization's needs. So here's what a section of our repositories look like. On the left, we have the Western Up Twig repository, and on the right, you'll see the Western Up Sass repository. We've chosen to structure them in an atomic design architecture, so you'll see corresponding files and directories on each side, like the colors here and the event card here. You'll also notice that the Sass repo doesn't mirror the directory structure exactly because we didn't find it necessary to create folders that we knew would only contain one file each. So it's real flexible, and you can organize these however makes the most sense for your team. In the Twig repo, though, there's always at least 2 files, like the Twig and the YAML for the markup and the data. So we went ahead and put those in folders. Now, once those organizational repositories were created, we published them to NPM so that any current or future property can easily include them without having to recreate or copy and paste any markup or styles from the main organization. We simply yarn add or npm install the packages, and they're immediately ready to use. So this is the main Western U website. It's going to use the organizational components and styles off the shelf with no components or with no customization or additions. And this means that the properties components folder is all but empty. The only file we have is a Sass file that just says to import the main style.sass file from the Western Up SCSS node module. So this gives us all the styles from the organizational repo. And you will actually see a comment on line 2 that says we could import just the Sass files we need, like the colors and the buttons, for example. But in this case, we do want everything, so we're just going to keep it simple. And one quick thing to note is that when you're developing the initial organizational components, we wanted to work with these various packages, but maintain our UI library workflow in Storybook. We had success using Yarn or npm link and Yarn workspaces for this. Learn is also an option, but either way, Webpack was able to handle the files from those repositories with hot reloading to meet the expectations of a traditional development workflow. We're not going to go into detail on how to set any of those up here, but because they're each a little different, but it's up to your team, and you can decide what to use. But those are some examples that examples of tools that we found helpful to work on that. So the Sass file in our components directory is pulling in the styles from the node module, but what about components? We just need to set up some configuration in 2 files to make this work. One for Storybook, which is going to run our component library, and then one for Drupal. So this is the Webpack config file for Storybook. And on line 35, you'll see a Twig section. If we zoom in on that, you'll see we're setting some namespaces. So Atoms points to Western Up Twig 01-Atoms in the node modules directory. And molecules, organisms, and templates are all doing the same thing. This tells Storybook where to look for templates when we type something like @atoms/whatever. Drupal needs to know that too. So in our themes info.yaml file, we're configuring the namespaces for the components module. And we're doing the exact same thing here. We're just pointing directly to the node module that we have installed. So here's an example of our component library. We decided to separate our grayscale from our branding colors, but that's totally up to you. Here's an example of a news card grid, or news cards in a grid, rather. And then our example homepage. You'll see the Storybook Chrome kind of on the left sidebar and the top if you're not familiar with that, and then the add-ons bar at the bottom. But if you want to see this without it, just like in Pattern Lab and the old version of Emulsify, you can open these in separate windows without that Chrome, so you can see this full screen. Now, let's walk through this real quick. At the top, we have a nice clean hero with a page title over the image. We scroll down, you'll start to see those news cards. For some odd reason, we put news cards in an event section, but we're moving pretty quick to get this together. So there's probably little things like that you'll notice. And then if we scroll down a little bit further, we have this big, beautiful CTA at the bottom and then the footer. So that's the home page of the main Western U property. Now I want to show you one more page, and that's the article content type. This is especially important because our arts property, a different website, is actually going to use all of these components and styles out of the box, showing that 100% consistency between properties is possible because they're sharing the exact same code through packaged components. So if we open this up, you'll see that there's the page title, there's an image and text. The sidebar has a basic CTA and an upcoming events list. There's a basic card grid a little further down, and then finally the CTA in the body, and then the footer. So far, we've just been looking at the component library with static content. Let's switch over to the Drupal site now and see how things compare. Here's the home page. You can see the same big hero at the top, the text with image paragraph, the upcoming events section using our news cards, and then the homepage CTA at the bottom right before the footer. So here they are side by side. On the left, we have the component library example with static content. And on the right side is the Drupal site with dynamic content. I've put the exact same text and images in just to show that they can be 100% identical. But in this case, the Drupal site looks a little bit smaller, and that's just because we've got the admin toolbar visible at the top and the view and edit and delete tabs in the middle, right above the main content. If I were to log out though, they would be 100% identical, but that wouldn't really be a good visual for showing the difference between a component library and Drupal. And then here's the full article page showing the exact same thing, the component library on the left and the Drupal site on the right. Now I'm going to let Evan start talking a little bit about the actual style guide part of this. I'll keep sharing my screen, but go ahead, Evan.
So yeah, as we mentioned before, the style guide is powered by the Emulsify Gatsby theme. So the Emulsify Gatsby theme provides a baseline of styling and functionality to produce a style guide quickly. But the tooling also makes it easy to quickly customize. So we built this custom Western University one in a couple of hours. It was very crucial that this be fully customizable. There are many sort of solutions out there for producing something like a style guide. And in fact, Storybook has one for documenting components inside of the Storybook UI. But when you're inside of that UI, it's not able to speak to these variety of audiences. It's a tool that's geared towards a specific team. And so it was very important that we had something that was its own customizable website. So we ended up going this route. This is an example welcome page. So you can see it has all the typical style guide page elements and the navigation built in. So this is us building off of the Gatsby theme, but producing a unique one for Western University. And then here's an example of a logo page. So one of the things that we chose is we use MDX for content by default. So if you're not familiar with MDX, MDX is basically Markdown, but it has the ability to place JSX elements, React elements inside of it. So it brings with it some kind of superpowers, and I'll show you those here in a second. One of those perks, so here's a different page showing the colors. One of those perks is something called shortcodes, which obviously, if you're familiar with WordPress or things like that, is kind of taken from other places. But the shortcode, this dark section above, is an example of in our Gatsby theme that's built in, that we have a shortcode that gives you the ability to highlight a background for a section, to highlight that section. And here's an example of that shortcode usage in an MDX file. So you can imagine a Markdown file that contains your traditional Markdown elements, and then you can see it's as simple as kind of knowing these shortcodes, which we document in the theme, obviously, and then just wrapping whatever content you want with that dark wrapper shortcode. So whatever gets placed between there is going to automatically be highlighted in the content region. That's just an example. And then also, because we leveraged the theme UI tool, which I've linked to on the side, it's theme UI is very vague. So I felt the need to explain what that was. And I'm not going to go into detail, but you can go check it out. This is a tool that was kind of built with Gatsby themes in mind, but it can be used in a variety of situations. It's not just a Gatsby tool. But it's a library for creating reusable interfaces. And from that, we not only get this kind of API-based theming, which allows for very quick overrides from everything from colors to typography to component styles. That's all via just a local config file. So you kind of define those things in config at the theme level, which is something that is if you're not familiar with Gatsby themes, that's like a dependency that you install. And then you build this in your own project. And you can create a local config file that overrides those. So you can really easily and quickly kind of add a look and feel to your project just in that method. But also a nice part of that is we get support for modes built in. So you can see here, I've clicked on the dark mode button in the top right, and we have some nice dark mode styles. And that's all based on those colors that are defined in that theme UI config. And then of course, here's a component page. So the buttons you see here are actually being pulled in via Storybook component shortcode. And that's from our Storybook instance. And you can control where your Storybook instance is coming from in your Gatsby config file. So you can set your Storybook instance to be something local. You can set it to be something remote that's hosted somewhere. You just pass in that URL for the iframe. And again, that's documented in there, and it's going to serve your components from that live instance, from that authoritative source. So these are the live authoritative components from our component library being pulled directly into our style guide. So the shortcode here requires just the ID that Storybook creates for a given component, which thankfully Storybook uses a really nice sort of memorizable way. So if you're used to writing in Storybook, you'll see that this is just kind of the name of the section that you're putting your component in, and then dash dash the name of the component. For us, we have it in a subdirectory. So we have atoms and then buttons under that. And then this component is called all because it's showing all the buttons. But that is readily available in the Storybook URL. And then also in the shortcode, we add the ability for you to pass a height prop. So you can actually pass a specific height, and that's just to make that iframe look nice, however you want in the style guide to meet the need of the component that's being served. And then of course, below that component, we have our code block, and that has built-in syntax highlighting. And this just works in the typical way of writing Markdown. So you just surround your content with backticks, and the syntax highlighting library gets used for that. And here's another example of a component page. So notice we have kept the Storybook component and the code block pieces separate, and that was intentional. And that's so you can organize your content any way you like. You could have pages with just the component display and some content, or you could have pages with just code blocks. And here, as an example, we have a component page with a component display. So that top part, that call to action is a Storybook component, and then some other markdown in between, and then a code block. So you can organize your content however you like. And then because of Gatsby's fantastic tooling and pipeline, we're even able to swap the syntax highlighting when in dark mode. So we're actually using a different syntax highlighting theme for dark mode versus light mode, and that was kind of just built in. And then finally, you probably noticed there are tabs on these components pages. So this allows you to organize those pages into sections. And the way that you do that in your Markdown files is very simple. There's YAML front matter tags at the top, which you're kind of used to using if you're writing Markdown. And there's one for tab, which gives the name of the tab, and then one for tab order to put it in the order that you would like. So yeah, that is a brief look at the Emulsify style guide, specifically this Western University style guide. And we will give some links at the end to the repos to where to find the Gatsby theme and all of that.
All right, so that was the style guide portion, and we went through the Storybook for the main website, but now let's dive into the Studio Arts property. This is probably what I'm most excited about with the new Emulsify, because we've never been able to do something like this before. So this is the College of Western U organization that should share components and styles with the organization's main repository, or main property rather, but also because it's an arts college, they want to have some visual flexibility through new components or by customizing the organizational ones. Since we do want to have access to the organizational components and styles, we run the exact same command we ran for the first property to include the twig and Sass as node modules. The main properties components directory was pretty bare. If you remember, there was just the one Sass file. But in this case, we have a number of custom components that are specific to the arts site. So we have directories for molecules, organisms, templates, and pages. We didn't need to add any new colors or base styling, so there's no base directory, and we're using all of the default button components and styles as well as other atoms, so we don't need an atoms directory here either. This keeps the properties repository super clean and easy to navigate. There's no duplication of the organizational components and styles. We'll just use those directly, and we only have to worry about the code that is custom to this property. And since these components are specific to the property, we're putting the twig, Sass, JavaScript, YAML files, all those things right next to each other in this. This is the same methodology that the old version of Emulsify and other component-driven development tools use. The Webpack config for the site is a little different because now we want to pull in components from the node module as well as our custom ones. It's actually really simple to do so. We just add additional namespaces to the config file. So here you'll see that organisms is pointing to the node modules directory, while WA_organisms is pointing to the components directory for this property for Western Arts. This means that I can call any component from either location at any time. I just use the regular organisms namespace to pull from the organization's components, or WA_organisms to pull from the properties components. And you can create unlimited namespaces. So depending on how you want to structure your component packages, you may have more, like a campaign components package that has all of your big splashy campaign related components that more than one site will use, but not necessarily all of them. Or like events related components that aren't needed by any of your brochureware websites, but the community focused ones all want to have access to. So the possibilities here are really endless. You can package them however you want. And then this is Drupal's info YAML file. We just do the exact same thing. All we have to do is use the same namespace, and magically Storybook and Drupal both know what to do when we call a component from either of the paths we've set up. So here's an example of the Western Arts article for the main arts site. It uses a template from the organization's components. We know that because it's not prefixed with anything. And then also uses molecules from the properties components. They are prefixed with WA_. And then there's an organism from the organization. Too many org words. This kind of mixing and matching components from different sources within a larger organization hasn't been possible before that I'm aware of. Doesn't mean it wasn't, it just means I'm not aware of it. And in Drupal, you can call the component you need when and where you need it. So here you can see the art quote paragraph type is using the art quote component from the arts property, and the card component is using the organization's basic card component, both on the same site though. Now back in our component library, something I didn't bring to attention is the fact that the Western Arts component library can show exactly what is helpful to its users. In this case, we're not showing any base or atoms components because we're not customizing any of them. We could show them, it's just a matter of creating a simple story for Storybook, but we decided in this case, it would just be clutter. You can go to the other Storybook instance, or better yet, use the style guide as a reference for whatever you need. I did throw in the article from the main organization just to show how this would work. And in the code base, we just have a template for the WA article, but in the stores.js file, we're telling it to show the organization's article as well. And this is because we're going to set up a content type on the main site to look and function identical to the main organization's article. But we're also going to have a custom WA article content type that has a different look and feel for different use cases. So here's a content hero that's custom to the arts property. And the example homepage with the big splashy hero. And then if you scroll down, you'll see that content hero a little further down. We also had to create a new layout for this property. Its homepage was designed to be edge to edge with no padding or margin around the main content. All of our other pages have some sort of minimal padding, but our designer, Dean, who's on this call, he wanted something very different for this site because he's artsy fartsy. So here's a couple of pages in Drupal that show everything we just looked at. The home page on the left is made up of entirely custom components specific to the arts property, while the article on the right is made up entirely of components from the organization's component repo. Again, still on the same site though. So this last page is a fully built out WA article in Drupal. If you're familiar with this organization's components, you'd realize that everything on the top of the page is custom to the arts property, except the last item on our page, which is the card grid. That's actually coming from the organization. If you break this down, you'll see the code I referenced earlier, and that the art quote is coming from the WA molecules namespace, which is the properties components, while each card in the card grid, as well as the grid itself actually, is getting its markup from the molecules namespace, meaning the organization's components. So this just goes to show how any property in your organization can be built with common, or what we call organizational components and styles, their own completely custom components and styles, and or a combination of both. With a new Emulsify Design System toolchain, you're given everything you need to work in the way that makes the most sense for your organization and your projects. That's the end of our demo, but we do have a few common questions we have heard so far and expect to hear more, so we're going to answer a few of those real quick. The first is, can I have multiple style guides? Evan, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, just had to find the mute button. So yeah, the answer to this is the Gatsby theme, and I kind of covered this a little bit earlier, but Gatsby theme is just a dependency that they created themes literally to be kind of a match for plugins. It's like a UI plugin that gives you styling and functionality, whatever you want to pass. And it's just a dependency in your project. So you install that in your project and then you just build on top of that in your project. So it's just like Storybook. And so you could have a style guide per property, but I will say this, the entrance of the style guide is a larger conversation than a UI library. A UI library is almost immediately used on a project, but remember that style guides must be maintained by someone. Someone has to create the content for them. And typically only larger organizations and properties have the teams to maintain these well. And I'm assuming I'm probably speaking to an audience of people similar to Brian and I who are providing development. We would not be the ones who populate the content for this. So it's key that like an organization needs and knows how to support the style
guide. The next question we're sure people are asking is where can we see this code and demos? Are they live somewhere? We're actually going to have these live somewhere soon, but the Drupal sites, the Storybook instances, and the style guide will eventually all be available to just view. For now, though, you can actually clone these down, spin each of them up with just a couple of commands, and dig through the code at your leisure. We have moved everything recently into the new Emulsify DS GitHub org, including these Western U repos. They're all public and open source, so just go to github.com/emulsify-ds. And when you go there, you'll see that we've broken everything out into separate repos. So you can use the Emulsify Drupal project for a Storybook and Webpack-based component library in a Drupal project. You can use the Emulsify Gatsby theme, the style guide in any project, regardless of tech stack. And although they share tool choices like Webpack, they are installed and run separately based on the project need. We do have some pretty good documentation already for this. If you go to docs.emulsify.info, we have some getting started help and installation instructions, things like that. Shows you how to install a component library standalone and in Drupal, as well as a style guide installation and usage. So check that out.
Also, I'll jump in and say there's also an upgrade path from the old Emulsify if we have any users of that.
Excellent. And what's the current state of the project? So both are actually available and usable in projects right now. So Emulsify Drupal is soon to be released in beta. We're actually using this in projects right now. Emulsify Style Guide is in alpha, and we hope to release beta within the next couple of months. But it is usable. If you have any feedback for this session, we love feedback. We'd love to hear from you. So go to mid.camp/6296 to let us know what you thought about this session. Any comments or suggestions would be great. Don't forget, contribution day is Saturday, 10 to 4 p.m., 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. You don't have to know code to give back. And we also have a new contributor training from 10 a.m. to noon. We are actually, after this is done, because we are just about out of time, gonna be hosting a virtual booth. So you can come talk to us. I'll post this link in the Slack channel in the chat in just a second. But if you go to this Zoom link, Evan and I will be there to just kind of hang out. Since we don't have a physical booth we can be standing at, and you can't approach us in person, we'll be there where you can approach us digitally as well. And I think that's it. Do we have any questions? Or does anybody want to?
We have one in here in the chat, which I guess we can use that for anybody who has questions. Go ahead and throw them into the chat. So it looks like Stan asked, assuming you are only supporting Drupal 8 sites, would you still decide to go with Storybook, Webpack, and NPM? So our answer to that is yes. We're investing in the ecosystem over there, and I think the thing that I can speak to on that side that is usually the typical concern, and it was our concern as well when we jumped into this, and I think part of it is to remember that this is a front-end workflow. And so we were always like split and fractured, because even in the old Emulsify, we had this like Pattern Lab PHP based thing, which they're moving to Node as well. And then we had this like Gulp pipeline to do all our build, which is, you know, all pretty much all front end workflows are node based now. And so that split was part of the like conversation of like, how do we get rid of this split? And really the only wall, so to speak, is the move from Twig, PHP Twig to Twig.js. And so what we have found with that is that it has been, the sort of bumps along the way have been very minimal. And we were committed as a company and as an organization, knowing that that was sort of going to make the front end workflow the right way, committed to helping with that tool. So helping with the Twig.js ecosystem. And, so yeah, we have not hit many bumps with that. It is a little bit different. We ran into some things and we've actually tried to document those in some of our components. Kind of ordering sometimes is kind of something you have to think about because apparently JS, the way it parses a file, is a little bit more ordered, or the way that at least Twig.js engine is, but that's getting a little bit into the weeds. What? What's the cat's name? This is actually a virtual background, so this is a fake. There's a green. No, I'm just kidding. That's Bug, Junebug, but we call her Bug. Great question. Great question. Do we have any others?
I mean, at least we got the most important one out there about the cat.
Yeah, yeah, it's critical.
Cool. Well, if there aren't any more questions, we can certainly wrap up. They'll be in the virtual booth. Oh, we got to wait for another question, so we can get to that. And then also another way that some other rooms have been handling follow-up questions. There is a room in the Slack, the MidCamp Slack, with the same number as this room, and we can post follow-up questions there. But the question is, when is the video available? I can take that one. The process is a little bit different as far as how we're saving videos. So we're trying to get those up as soon as we can. We already have some from yesterday, but it's probably going to vary on a session by session basis, but hopefully in the next few days. And then we did have another question from Tyler. Is Storybook a replacement for Pattern Lab?
Short answer is yes. You can do everything you could do in Pattern Lab in Storybook. That's the tool we decided to use, like Evan said, because of the ecosystem around it, because of all of the Storybook add-ons and plugins that are available. There's plugins for everything. And so you can completely customize it however you want. You can even theme the Storybook UI if you wanted to. It's all very flexible, but you can show all the components you want. It's actually a little more flexible than Pattern Lab in my experience, because we can pick and choose what we show in there, whereas in Pattern Lab, if there was a twig file, it was shown in the component library, unless you did like the underscore thing. But in this, you can have as many components you want and just show only the components you want with the variations you want, without having to, I don't know, do any kind of hacks like that. Let's see.
Brian Perry, we have some more questions. Do we still have time to take those?
Yep, yeah, we definitely have more time. And I've also learned that threatening to stop questions is the best way to get more questions to come in. So that's
oh, perfect. So I think the next one was, are there alternative systems and how do they compare? So I'm assuming this is, Howard, I'm assuming this is to the design system that we've spoken to as a whole. So the sort of the entire pipeline we've been talking about. We did not find ones that address this, but we're kind of addressing a variety of needs, and that's why we built things separately. The piece that we saw that was missing was actually the style guide piece. So there are style guides available. So like Carbon Design System is one of the most famous. It's IBM's design system, and they built it using Gatsby, and they actually open sourced it, so you can use their style guide. But their UI is predefined. And so one of the key things for us that drove us down this road is the importance of the style guide to be designed to the organizational need. And that's not just like colors and look and feel. That could be the flexibility of putting a menu at the top versus on the left. That could be, I mean, that it's a very, it's a much more like highly designed tool than a UI library. And so we did not find a solution for that. And that's actually the space we're trying to fill, is to say, here's a Gatsby solution for this gap that we see. And obviously we benefit from it ourselves and can use it with clients. Hopefully
Rebecca
that
also,
answered that.
oh yeah. Rebecca asked, how do designers specifically use the design system in terms of downloading design items? Like,
I can speak to this.
Mockups. Go ahead.
So it's funny you asked that. That's actually literally at the top of our list of to-dos is, and Gatsby has a plugin for it. It will probably be a matter of an hour of getting this in for just allowing files to be referenced in markup and downloaded from that. It's similar to an image, but it's a different plugin. So literally the next item on our list, there's some kind of to-dos that we have. One are to add tabs to the code viewer, so you can actually show code in multiple languages. There's actually a PR up for that right now that I just haven't reviewed. And then things that kind of we want to add over the next few months, like search, the ability to search the style guide. And again, we're leaning on Gatsby's plugin and ecosystem here. So all of these things are really just tapping into resources that are already there.
Do you know which plugin that is? Rebecca was asking.
I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, I don't remember the name of it. Sorry. I could probably look it up.
Cool. Let's see,
Got one more.
For new projects, the designers use the components that are already in the base system, or do they design new ones? That's, I think what you're asking is, once there's already an organization set up and we're creating a new project, like a new property underneath that. So like our, maybe our law school in our example from our talk, the law school, the designers. I'm not a designer, so this is really, I'm going to be guessing here. But yes, I would imagine they would use the existing components as much as or when necessary. But like we saw with the art school, if there isn't a component that solves the need or the vision that the designer has, then they create a new one, and that new property would then have a custom component, just like our art school did. The one other thing is that you can, I briefly mentioned you could package things like campaign components for splash pages or event components. You could actually find out that, like, on that law school, the designers created a new thing that then they also want to use on other schools. And what you could do then is take that component and its styles and markup or whatever and package those into its own like node module in the case that what we're doing, and publish that. And then that school could just npm install that package again, as well as any other schools could npm install that and have that new shared component in there. Or it could be pushed upstream if we decide we want to use this on all of our sites. You can really develop these things however you want. It could start out as a custom component on our property, but then eventually get moved upstream somewhere to be shared. I hope I answered that question. I kind of rambled for a little bit, but.
I can hop in on that question as well. So one of the key things that we have found in exploring design systems and just in our experience with clients, so there's the design, often the audiences have different responses to a design system. So like accessibility, for instance, like it's one of the most compelling arguments to the top level of the organization that you could build an accessible component and then everyone can leverage that, because it's very important to them, to the compliance office, that happen now for legal reasons. But for the design teams, they're looking at it and thinking, please don't hand me a design system that restricts me. Like if I'm on this property and I want to do something custom. So it was always important to us to build the ability to sort of support any level of control within that. So you could literally build a property that uses just organization components. And that might be for cost-effective reasons. It might be for accessibility reasons. You could also just build a property that uses just some of the styles and then override some. That's like the fastest way kind of to, you use buttons, but your buttons are green and not blue or whatever, all the way down to complete control. You can build your own components. And that's kind of what Brian showed on the Western Arts, is he used some from the org, but built some that were completely custom for the art site.
I am posting a couple links for Slack in the chat right now. Somebody asked about the Slack channel. I posted one for the MidCamp Slack. Their Stay Connected page has a link to that. We're in room MidCamp 324 right now. But you can also join the Drupal Twigs Slack. I'm going to post that here for kind of long-term, after the MidCamp it has come and gone. The Drupal Twig Slack, Evan and I are both in there. I think there's a channel for Storybook that we're in. I don't know. You can find us. Just ping either one of us in there. And we're just kind of always in there, so you can do that at any time.
Excellent. All right, that sounds like we're winding down. There's a bunch of great questions and good feedback, and thanks Evan and Brian for the great presentation. If people want to, use their clap reaction or unmute and clap, feel free. But thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. And Evan and I are gonna jump over to
There it is.
We're
Real
gonna
claps.
use a virtual booth now. So if anybody wants to come ask questions in a more informal space that's not recorded, feel free to jump over.
Yep, you can ask your real questions in there.
Oh, we'll also be we can share some things live that we didn't want to do here just in case of lag and stuff like that.